saved enough for my dream home, but my relatives suggest I opt for a smaller house to benefit them. I'm a 32-year-old man who's devoted much of his adult life to working and saving diligently. For over 10 years, my singular focus has been to purchase my ideal home. I've taken on multiple jobs, created strict budgets, skipped vacations, and lived minimally, all to afford a place that truly feels like my own, a home I could tailor to my exact desires. After countless years of hard work, I've located the ideal house. It's conveniently near the city, making my daily commute manageable, yet it's distant enough to offer tranquility. The house isn't sprawling, but it has everything I need: a warm atmosphere, contemporary features, and just enough room to be cozy without feeling too spacious. One of the highlights is a small deck in the back where I can enjoy grilling or relaxing with a book. Importantly, I managed to secure it entirely on my own without financial assistance. Now, as I'm about to receive the keys, it feels like everything is coming together. However, once my family learned about my impending purchase, their reaction started to shift. Initially, there were subtle comments. My parents disclosed their recent financial losses from a failed investment, hinting at needing help without outright asking for it. Then my sister suggested I consider a bigger house just in case. At first, I dismissed it as a joke. Why would a single guy like me need more space? But she persisted, arguing it could be useful if our parents needed to stay or if I needed temporary accommodations. Despite her casual tone, the implication was clear. I firmly explained that the house I chose suits me perfectly. I've spent years planning for this, and I don't intend to maintain extra space that I won't use. She looked at me as if I was being unreasonable, but I thought it would just pass. Unfortunately, that was just the start. Now, whenever I meet my family, the topic of the house inevitably comes up. They speak about it as though it belongs to them, as if it's a family resource that I'm merely holding for everyone's benefit. My mom has a way of making suggestions that sound more like expectations. She often mentions how fortunate I am to be buying my own place and emphasizes how important family is, especially during tough times. Then she looks at me pointedly, as if to say we must support one another. Their hints became more straightforward over time. They'd call to check on me, and somehow the conversation would always turn back to how an extra room could make the house more accommodating just in case someone needed to stay for a while. This started to stress me out. My friends noticed I was off my game too. They sent texts encouraging me to stick to my original plans and not let anyone sway my hard-earned achievements. Yet every family visit brought a new wave of guilt and pressure. No matter how hard I tried to change the subject, discussions about the house would always dominate. Then, I hit a rough spot at work. My distraction led to a mistake, and my boss had a serious discussion with me. I realized I couldn't let my family's pressure jeopardize my career as well. It was gradually wearing me down. Every mention of the house would unleash a flood of suggestions from my family. Finally, I reached my breaking point. My sister visited and made yet another comment about choosing a bigger house. I couldn't hold back any longer and told her just how difficult it had been to save up for this house. I explained to her how many weekends I spent working extra hours and the sacrifices I made to save up every dollar. She appeared remorseful at first, but then justified it by saying our family was in a tough spot, implying I should prioritize their needs over mine. The breaking point came when my parents proposed managing the house if I opted for a bigger one, suggesting they could maintain it until I needed to move in. It was evident they were planning to use my funds for their own future, treating the house as if they already owned it. I wondered if I was being unreasonable or just selfish. I decided to lay everything out openly, seeking some external advice. The support I received was overwhelming. Many people agreed that I wasn't obligated to handle the financial burdens of others and that I deserved to enjoy the fruits of my labor without guilt. Some even cautioned about how families can manipulate emotions to get what they want. It was comforting to see others validate my feelings, but I didn't realize this was just the start of my family's attempts to sway me. I had shared my story on Reddit to gain some unbiased perspectives, and the community's response was enlightening. Unfortunately, my cousin, an avid Reddit user, came across my post. She recognized my story immediately and quickly informed the rest of the family. Soon after, I was bombarded with calls and messages. The tone had shifted markedly. My parents demanded to speak with me and showed up at my door the next day, both looking very serious. They were mainly upset about me discussing our private issues online. My mom argued that family matters should be kept within the family. They felt betrayed, as if I had exposed them publicly just to shame them. The irony was stark. They had no problem discussing the use of my house as a communal resource, yet they demanded privacy when their actions were scrutinized. This wasn't just a casual conversation. It quickly turned into a formal announcement that they wanted a full family meeting to discuss what they called family obligations and how we could all support each other better. It seemed like a veiled attempt to pressure me, but I agreed to attend, thinking I should at least listen to them one last time. The meeting was scheduled for the upcoming weekend, and attendance was deemed compulsory by my parents. I braced myself for a gathering of disappointed relatives, the same ones who had been hinting at me getting a larger house for weeks. Yet, I was still surprised by the extent of their expectations when I got there. The atmosphere was tense when I walked in, with my mom, dad, sister, and a few other relatives present, blending the mood of an intervention with an interrogation. No sooner had I sat down than they began to explain that their concerns extended beyond just the size of the house. They argued that it would be beneficial for everyone if I contributed more financially to support some relatives who were facing financial hardship. It wasn't just about acquiring a bigger property anymore. Now, they expected me to help pay for other relatives' expenses as well. They used phrases like doing the right thing for the family and sharing your blessings. My dad even had a notepad with figures he thought I should contribute toward the debts and living costs of various family members. They outlined a plan for how my savings could be distributed to meet their needs and also go towards a larger down payment for a house that would accommodate everyone. When I had the chance to respond, I was forthright. I expressed that I had worked far too hard and given up too much over the years to reach my goal, and I wasn't about to give up on my dreams now. I emphasized that the house, my savings, and these decisions were mine alone. I made it clear that I was not obligated to provide a larger home or financial support on top of that. There was a brief silence, and I hoped they might understand my stance. But instead, my parents issued an ultimatum stating if I didn't comply, they would need to reconsider our relationship altogether. They continued arguing that support within a family is mutual and hinted that I might lose certain family privileges if I resisted their plans. My sister also weighed in, expressing disappointment that I wasn't more supportive, making me feel like I was failing everyone. Despite the heavy guilt, I stood firm, insisting that this decision was for my personal well-being. Almost immediately after that conversation, the atmosphere turned chilly. Relatives began to distance themselves. My calls and texts were answered with brief, indifferent responses. It felt as if they had erected a barrier to show me that I was now an outsider. Soon, even distant relatives got involved. Aunts and uncles started to contact me, each echoing the sentiment that I was being selfish or suggesting I should reconsider for the sake of family unity. Each call felt like another push to make me cave under the guilt. Thankfully, my close friends were a strong support network during this period. I shared everything with them, and they continually urged me not to succumb to the pressure. They reminded me of my hard work towards owning my home and the importance of maintaining my boundaries, especially when those boundaries were blatantly disrespected by my family. Their support was crucial in helping me remain steadfast. In the meantime, my siblings didn't let up. They contacted me individually, stressing the hard times they were facing and hinting that they would remember if I didn't contribute. It seemed each family member played a role in this pressure campaign. My parents issued ultimatums, my siblings laid on the guilt, and other relatives added their voices to the pressure. As the situation intensified, I turned to Reddit again for additional perspectives and advice. The response was overwhelming, with many advising me to stay strong and alert to further manipulation. Some even suggested considering legal measures to protect myself, a thought I hadn't entertained before. Realizing things might escalate further, I began to think seriously about safeguarding my interests. So, I decided to speak with a lawyer. I needed to know my legal rights in case any relatives tried to claim ownership of my house or cause other problems. It was just a precautionary consultation, but it gave me a sense of security. However, when my family learned I had consulted a lawyer, they took it as an act of aggression. They criticized me for prioritizing money over family and accused me of valuing the opinions of strangers online more than my own relative. By the end of it, I felt completely exhausted. I had established my boundaries, yet it felt like I was constantly being pulled back into a struggle with my family, who seemed to be pulling even harder against me. Despite the support from online communities and friends, the sense of isolation from my own family was overwhelming. I was at my limit, but I was determined not to give in. The family pressure continued relentlessly. Just when I thought things might calm down, I received a long, handwritten letter from my mom in my mailbox one morning, filled with guilt-inducing reminiscences and stories from my childhood. Reminding me of past times when we supported each other, she repeated over and over that family is everything, hoping to sway my decision. Before I could fully digest her letter, my dad called. Unlike my mom's emotional appeal, he was blunt, criticizing me for being too self-reliant and reminding me that I hadn't achieved everything alone. He implied that I owed them for my successes. He didn't directly demand that I buy a larger house or offer financial support, but the implication was clear from his tone. Soon after, my sister reached out in a more direct approach, asking for a personal loan. She explained she was in a bind and promised to repay it once her situation improved. I could see my sister's strategy. She was still hoping I would relent and start providing financial support. I responded politely, explaining that I couldn't offer financial help as I needed to safeguard my own resources, particularly with a significant investment like a house pending. She seemed upset, but chose not to push further at that time. However, it wasn't long before I was invited to another family meeting. I attended, knowing full well the direction it might take, but wanting to maintain a civil approach. The atmosphere was charged with tension as the entire family gathered. They expressed their disappointment deeply, recalling the sacrifices they had made for me throughout my life. My mother's look seemed to accuse, as if my decisions were causing great harm to the family. Then came another ultimatum. They implied heavily that without my willingness to make more family-centric decisions, I might find myself estranged from them. The choice of words was roundabout, but the intent was clear: conform to their expectations or face losing their support. They stopped short of saying I would be completely cut off, but they suggested that my decisions could lead to lasting repercussion. After that meeting, I began to question myself. Was I being selfish? Did I owe them more than I thought? It was difficult to think of distancing myself from my family, as they had been a significant part of my life. Feeling conflicted, I decided to discuss everything with a therapist. She listened intently and affirmed that it was healthy to prioritize my own needs and set boundaries, especially when those boundaries were not respected by others. Feeling more assured, I posted an update on Reddit to see if anyone had experienced similar family dynamics. The feedback was overwhelmingly supportive. Many people urged me to remain firm and reinforced that using guilt as manipulation was a common tactic. Others shared their personal stories, which helped me feel justified in my stance. Not too long after, my sister approached me again, this time with a different proposal. My sister requested to temporarily stay at my house until she could stabilize her financial situation. It seemed like a minor favor, but I anticipated the likely outcome. Her stay would extend beyond the initial promise, leading other family members to expect the same hospitality. I decisively told her that I didn't intend my home to become communal housing or a fallback option for anyone. After making my position clear, my relationship with my family cooled significantly. My parents started to leave me out of family gatherings, group messages, and even holiday plans. Their actions were not just passive, they actively communicated that I was no longer welcome unless I reconsidered my stance. Even my aunt, who typically stayed out of such matters, called to express her disappointment, suggesting how much better it would be if we supported one another. When I persisted in my refusal, she ended the call abruptly. The situation escalated when my parents turned to social media to air their grievances. They posted vaguely about being abandoned by someone they loved, clearly alluding to me, and lamented over being forsaken for material gains. Although they didn't name me directly, it was obvious to all our acquaintances who they meant. The post drew a lot of sympathy from relatives and friends who sided with them, and some even reached out to me, hinting that I had made a grave mistake. I took to Reddit again to share this development, and the response was overwhelming. Many people showed their support, sharing similar experiences of familial manipulation and the struggle to maintain personal boundaries. The solidarity from strangers provided a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in facing such dilemmas. This ordeal only strengthened my resolve to proceed with my plans independently. Despite my family's lack of understanding and acceptance, I was determined to safeguard my achievements and pursue my dream house, which was now within reach. Amidst being ostracized from family activities and communications, another twist emerged. My parents shifted their strategy towards legal measures, contacting me with a new proposal under the guise of easing everyone's tensions, given my determination to proceed with the house purchase. They proposed that they co-sign the property with me, not to contribute financially, but as a precautionary measure in case I needed help managing it in the future. They presented this as a generous offer, as though they were providing me with a safety net. My suspicion immediately heightened. Co-signing would mean their names would be on my house. When I questioned the necessity of this arrangement, Their responses were evasive, citing family security and a desire to have a say in the property's future. As I pressed further, their true motives began to surface. They suggested that co-owning the house would provide them with security in case of financial difficulties, implying they could even sell or leverage the property if necessary. It became clear this offer wasn't about assisting me, but securing a financial fallback for themselves using my house. After years of hard work and saving to buy my dream home, they now wanted a stake in it just in case. I firmly declined their proposal, which caused an immediate backlash. My dad angrily accused me of selfishness and betraying family value. Then they delivered their harshest blow yet. They disowned me, declaring that if I valued the house over family, then our ties would be severed permanently. In the aftermath of this confrontation, my friends rallied around me. They had supported me throughout this ordeal, and upon hearing the latest development, they organized a support gathering. They reinforced the reasons behind my decisions and reminded me that I was not being selfish for wanting to maintain what I had earned. They offered their continued support, whether I needed practical advice or just someone to talk to. With their encouragement and the guidance from my therapist, who emphasized the importance of maintaining my boundaries and independence, I felt empowered to persevere. Their support was crucial in reinforcing that I didn't need to compromise my principles to appease my family. Guidance from a professional reinforced the need to protect myself, regardless of my family's opinions. I shared the latest developments in another update on Reddit, which garnered a massive response. The community provided legal advice and strategies to secure my assets, including suggestions for adding protective clauses to my property and finances to block any future manipulative efforts from my family. Empowered by this advice, I arranged a meeting with a lawyer who assisted in establishing financial safeguards and ensured my family could not tamper with my property rights. When my family learned about these legal precautions, they reacted vehemently. I received a desperate email from my parents pleading with me to reconsider. In their message, they painted me as abandoning them in their time of need, emphasized the supreme importance of family, and claimed I would regret my decisions and lose the support of those who had always been there for me. However, I recognized these as further tactics to make me relent. The Reddit community continued to support me, with many users affirming my actions and sharing their own tales of family conflicts. These stories bolstered my determination not just to protect my home, but to assert my boundaries firmly, signaling that I was not merely a safety net or a financial resource for others. Despite the harshness of potentially losing familial ties, I moved forward. Following that last email, all communication ceased. My family stopped calling, texting, and trying to influence my decisions. Initially, the silence was unnerving, but it soon became a source of peace, liberating me from the relentless pressure. As the days passed, I began to appreciate the tranquility that came with this newfound independence. Finally, when the day arrived to close on the house, I walked through each room, reflecting on my journey. This house represented more than just a physical structure. It was the culmination of years of dedication and perseverance, a dream transformed into reality. As I signed the documents and finalized the purchase, a sense of relief washed over me, mingled with a tinge of sadness for how things had evolved with my family. Yet, the predominant feeling was freedom. The day I moved in was subdued, yet momentous. My friends helped, filling the new space with laughter and warmth, celebrating each step as I unpacked. The empty house quickly transformed into a real home, one shaped by my choices and efforts. It was a place free from family drama, just a clean slate where I could live life on my terms. Settling in, I realized that standing my ground hadn't cost me anything. Instead, it had granted me peace and independence. The journey was arduous, but in my own home, I felt prepared for the future, confident and content in my sanctuary. Update 4. After settling into my home, I believed I had found tranquility. However, one afternoon, I arrived to find several cars in my driveway. It was my family, my parents, and some relatives had unexpectedly shown up, ostensibly to see the house, treating it like a casual family gathering. As I approached, they welcomed me and immediately asked for a tour. Feeling somewhat cornered but hoping to prevent any further unannounced visits, I agreed to a quick walkthrough. I showed them around, highlighting the kitchen, the rooms, and the backyard, subtly making it clear that it wasn't a large estate with space to spare. Despite my intentions, they began to make remarks about how wonderful it would be if the house had additional rooms. An aunt suggested where another guest room could be easily added. Then my sister casually mentioned her upcoming job transfer and her potential need for a temporary place to stay. Her comments were offhand, yet it was evident she was probing to see if I might offer to host her. At that moment, I halted the tour. Facing everyone, I reiterated that this was my home, a private space not meant for frequent or casual visits. I firmly stated that I was not looking to take in any roommates or temporary guests. The atmosphere instantly tensed. Their displeasure with my decision was clear. In the kitchen, away from the rest of the family, my parents began a well-worn guilt trip. They highlighted my fortunate position relative to other family members who were struggling. My mom's tone softened as she reminded me of the values they had taught me about generosity and stated poignantly that family is the only true possession we have in this world. She grew emotional, her voice breaking as she asked if I had forgotten all their support over the years. Despite feeling the emotional weight of their words, I maintained my stance, emphasizing the years of hard work and personal sacrifices that enabled me to buy this house. The next day, I saw that my parents had posted on social media about feeling abandoned by someone they loved deeply, which led to a wave of sympathetic responses from relatives and family friends. Some reached out to me directly, echoing the sentiment that I was turning my back on the family when they needed me most. I sought advice from my therapist, who had been a constant support through this ordeal. I recounted the unexpected visit and the pressures to accommodate my sister. My therapist reassured me that I was not obligated to resolve their financial difficulties and that setting clear boundaries was vital for my well-being. This helped solidify my resolve to stand firm. Just as I thought the situation might be de-escalating, my sister sent a forthright message. She stated that unless I made my home available to help the family, I would be excluded from all family gatherings indefinitely. This was a direct ultimatum. I chose not to respond. I had clearly established my boundaries and there was no need for further explanation. If my choice meant exclusion from family events because I wouldn't compromise my home, then I was ready to accept that consequence. After discussing with friends and gathering opinions from Reddit, I took an additional step by instructing my lawyer to send a formal letter to my family. This letter explicitly demanded that they cease any further harassment or manipulative tactics concerning my property. The letter was assertive yet respectful, clearly stating that my boundaries were firm. However, when my extended family learned of the legal notice, they reacted sharply. Several relatives criticized me for being overly harsh and accused me of prioritizing my house over family ties. Despite the backlash, I was beyond feeling guilty. I recognized that these steps were necessary to maintain order in my life. This ordeal highlighted a deeper issue. My family had historically maintained a degree of control over me, dictating my financial contributions and availability to meet their needs. This confrontation was about more than just property. It was about asserting my autonomy. The following days brought a welcome silence. My phone, once a constant source of stress with endless calls and messages from relatives, finally went quiet. It appeared that the letter had made my stance clear. I was not to be swayed. In this newfound tranquility, I relished setting up my home exactly as I desired. I hung my favorite artworks, arranged my furniture, and personalized my space. Friends came over with housewarming presents, and we enjoyed a joyful evening in the backyard, a celebration of new beginnings. For the first time, I felt truly at home, surrounded by a space that was unequivocally mine. This journey was about more than securing a physical dwelling. It was about embracing my life decisions and future independently. After years of external control, I felt liberated, finally in a place that felt rightly mine. Update 5. Following the distribution of the lawyer's letter, my family's incessant communication ceased. Initially, the quiet was unsettling, as if I was bracing for further conflict. However, as time passed, the absence of their demands allowed me to establish a new peaceful rhythm in my life. This serenity enabled me to focus on personal growth. I continued my therapy sessions, discussing strategies to maintain healthy family boundaries. These conversations were invaluable, helping me navigate my feelings without succumbing to guilt, reinforcing my right to a life defined by my own choices and desires. I didn't fully grasp how much I needed that support until it arrived. My friends became a regular presence, visiting on weekends with snacks, movies, and a warmth that had been absent for too long. We spent evenings grilling, watching films, and simply enjoying each other's company. It felt like they had become my chosen family, and we often laughed about the odd path that had brought us here, making my familial troubles seem far away. Then, Unexpectedly, I received a message from my sister. Given our last interaction, her reaching out was surprising. She didn't offer an outright apology, but acknowledged that she might have been too forceful. She still believed I owed something to our family, but recognized she may have overstepped. Her message was softer, less confrontational. I took some time to think over my response, eventually replying in a kind, yet firm manner. I expressed love for her and our family, but reiterated the need to make decisions that were right for me. I explained that my actions were not about abandonment, but about pursuing the life I had diligently worked for. She read my message, but didn't reply. Although she remained silent, the exchange somehow seemed to clear the air. News of our conversation spread, and soon other relatives reached out, some showing understanding and wishing to maintain contact, while others continued to lay on guilt, emphasizing family over what they called minor monetary disputes. I responded succinctly to each, standing firm in my stance and avoiding drawn-out debate. With the diminishing family pressure, I turned my focus inward. I established a morning routine that included reading, walking, or enjoying a quiet coffee on my back deck. These small rituals transformed my house into a home and grounded me, reinforcing the reasons behind my struggle for this independence. I shared a final update on Reddit to express gratitude for the community's support throughout this journey. Their advice and encouragement had been invaluable, and I wanted to acknowledge that. The outpouring of supportive comments was heartening. Many shared how my story had inspired them to establish their own boundaries, reinforcing that I had made the right choices. Closing this chapter felt deeply satisfying, especially with the community that grasped the depth of my struggles. Just when I thought things were finally stabilizing, my parents reached out one last time. They sent a message insisting they would be there once I came to my senses and realized I wanted the family back in my life. They portrayed it as though I had left them and would inevitably return. Rather than being pulled into yet another debate, I responded with a composed and definitive message. I communicated that I was forging my path independently and expected them to respect my autonomy. I assured them I would reach out if and when I was ready, but for now, I emphasized the importance of my space. To symbolize moving on from the past and towards new beginnings, I set up a savings fund dedicated to future investments and personal goals. Later, I celebrated a new chapter with an official housewarming party surrounded by my friends. We decorated the place with lights, enjoyed great food, and the house was filled with laughter and positive energy. That evening, as I looked around at the vibrant faces of my friends, the house pulsated with life and warmth. I had earned this moment through perseverance. And here I was, in the midst of genuine support. The laughter and lively conversations imbued my home with the spirit of joy and authenticity. This celebration marked not just a housewarming, but the start of a new era, one free from old burdens and full of potential. With the family conflict resolved and a serene new life ahead, I felt eager and open to whatever adventures awaited.